Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Our guest today is Kris Millgate. Kris is the CEO of Tight Blind Media and an Emmy-nominated outdoor journalist who documented disappearing salmon across the Northwest. In today's Outdoor Adventure Series episode, Kris chats with us about her current project, a new wildlife film on Grizzly Ground. Kris, it is a pleasure to have you back on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me back, Howard. It's always fun to visit with you.
Fantastic. Now, the word grizzly in my intro there, it makes me shiver. I've only ever seen them. I've been to the zoo, but that just does not count. But I've never seen them in the wild. And as someone who lives up in the Northwest and in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, as you've described on your website, grizzlies are like your next door neighbor.
Yeah, grizzlies do live in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and that is where I live, work, and play. And it adds a dynamic to the landscape that you just don't find anywhere else in the lower 48. I mean, the reason we have grizzlies here is because we still have vast swaths of undeveloped land. There are a lot of places in America that can't say that. So you have to have space, major chunks of space, in order to have grizzly bears wandering. But even with that, there's still trouble spots. That if a bear gets into trouble, most likely it's because we've done something that's caused them to become a trouble bear. And you don't want to see that happen. I mean, half a century ago, we decided we wanted grizzly bears to come back. They were almost extinct and they're still on the endangered species list, but they've made a decent comeback. And now we have to figure out how to live with them on the landscape.
When you mentioned that they had nearly gone extinct, at least in this area, well, first off, are grizzlies only found in this greater Yellowstone area?
Grizzly bears are found in the Greater Yellowstone area, which would include parts of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming,
Mhm.
Yellowstone National Park, and Grand Teton National Park.
Right.
The bears in those areas that I just said are considered Greater Yellowstone bears.
Okay.
Then you have like Northern Continental Divide grizzly bears, which are Montana and Canada. Then you also have bears in Alaska. But when you're talking about what people think about when they think about the classic Yellowstone grizzly bear that people used to go into Yellowstone to feed a century ago, those are Greater Yellowstone bears. And it took several decades to undo the bad habit of letting people come in the park and feed the bears.
Uh, and that was actually going to be one of my questions somewhere down the line. I've seen the videos, and you can't get by anything without seeing a TikTok video or an Instagram. Is somebody driving and there's bears and they roll down a window and they put their hand out, which is a big mistake, I would imagine, trying to feed the bears, and that develops a bad habit, and also I would imagine it endangers both the human and the bear.
A lot of times people say, you're following grizzlies. You realize that a grizzly can kill you. Yes, I'm aware that a grizzly can kill me. I know that. I never forget that. But what scares me most when I'm in bear country is not the bears. It's the people.
Yeah.
And the way people behave around bears is very unnerving and uncomfortable. And I think that's what causes a lot of the trouble is it's how we're behaving. These bears have figured out how to live among us, but we haven't quite figured out how we're supposed to behave among them. And that's when you're seeing all those uncomfortable things of people getting too close to any animal. And I went through the Yellowstone National Park archives and I went back a century while I was working on this new film. And I found the most startling images that were places where the park would put out the garbage and then they put bleachers around the garbage. And the garbage was for the bears. The bleachers were for the people that came to watch the bears eat the garbage. I mean, it was a tourist attraction.
Oh my.
And those pictures are incredible to look at right now because we know that's not how we should behave. But a century ago, we thought differently. And then there was all kinds of pictures, even clear up into the 60s, of 2, 3, 4 bears up on a car window. Those things are kind of embedded in our history with grizzly bears, even though they are not supposed to go on today.
It's like Barnum and Bailey in the wild. And this, it's like, oh
You
my
know,
God.
it's true. There are a lot of times when I feel like it's a circus scene that I'm watching. And the one thing that really freaks people out at a bear jam is when I put my camera on the people instead of the bears. They've come to see the show, which is the bear. They don't want to be the show. But when I'm
Right.
trying to show you as an audience what it's like at a bear jam, shot footage of the people at the bear jam. And that makes everybody uncomfortable because they don't want the lens. They don't want the lens on them. They just want to look at the animal in kind of this unintentional circus setting at this point.
Wow. I recall in one of your videos, you had bears out in the distance feeding, and it's hard to tell if it was 100 yards or 200 yards. And there's this whole lineup of folks with these big long lenses. I would probably be one of those, taking photos. And it's like they're on display, but they're in the wild there. And it's just, I don't know. It's nice. I'd want to do it. It's like, it's our version of the big five. You go to Africa and you get I don't know if it's the big five, but you get the tigers, the elephants, the giraffes, the lions. Here in the US, that grizzly bear is probably one of the top targets of what folks want to see when they go out west. And
Yeah, it's
beautiful.
pretty. Grizzlies are pretty iconic, and I think
Yeah,
that uh, I can think of the situations that you're thinking of, and I know in particular, one in specific, there was a major highway between us and the animals. Another one, a major river was between us and the animals. Um, but when you see those long lenses, that's actually comforting to me because
okay.
that means those people, that crowd of people, are really far away from the animal, even if their shots look close. In my film, you will see shots that look close. That is a zoom lens.
Okay.
What gets really alarming is when you show up at a bear jam and everybody there has a phone. You can't zoom in very well with your phone, and everybody wants that picture of the animal, and they're moving in close. And if it's a grizzly with 2 cubs and you're moving in with a cell phone for a picture, that is disaster. So you can show close stuff with a long lens
Yeah,
and be extremely far away from that animal without disturbing it. You have to remember, you're in their home. They're
right.
in the wild. You're visiting. You're in their house. You need to be respectful of their space.
Yeah, don't let me get started on the selfie. That's bad news. So I'm curious, what led you to want to plan and produce this project?
On Grizzly Ground comes close on the hills of Ocean to Idaho.
Right.
And when I produced Ocean to Idaho, I wanted to follow salmon migration
Uh-huh.
and show you what that migration route looks like. As soon as that film came out, people started saying, "What's next?" Which I find exciting and anxiety inducing at the same time. Exciting because that means you're into it. You want to connect with the wild. You want to see what happens when the wild tries to make its way with us in the way. And I love that. That means I'm doing something that you want. That's what I want my work to do, connect you with the outdoors. But at the same time, I say it's anxiety inducing because you're asking for what's next before I even know. And so while I was touring with the film about salmon, people were saying, "What's next?" And it's pretty hard to top an epic salmon migration. But what do you want to top it with? Well, you top it with something that devours fish, right?
Mhm.
And that's grizzlies. And because grizzlies can migrate more than 1,000 miles in one summer, I thought if I can figure out a way to follow grizzly bears and not put myself at risk and not put the bears at risk, but show you what they go through when they're trying to make their way with us in the way, that'd be pretty compelling. And so that's why I decided to follow that. There's a common theme there, salmon and grizzlies. They're both on the endangered species list.
Mhm.
So that's part of the intrigue as well.